Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of Finweek, where we will look into fintech ecosystems in Europe. I will start with bringing the speakers up. First, Martin, welcome to our stage here. Martin, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience here before you sit down.
Hello, my name is Martin Krendl. I represent here the Attorney's Office Prosman Pavlovic, and it's an honor to be here with you and to speak on the exciting themes that we await in today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin Krendl. Martin Peter, Head of Banking Department, Minister of Finance of the Slovak Republic.
Hi, my name is Martin Peter. I'm the head of the Banking Department and also the head of Center for Financial Innovation, where we have at the Ministry of Finance. Looking forward for the interesting discussion.
Peter Pencesh, Head of Payment Services and Innovation Section of the National Bank of Slovakia. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm from the National Bank of Slovakia.
Perfect to have you here. Then we have our online participants. We start with Javier Corman.
I'm very happy to be with you today, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. And then Shmuel Ben-Tovim, all the way from Israel.
Hi, everybody.
Israeli economist and president of the Fintech Community in Israel.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to meet all of you and to meet my friend Javier again. Wish you a successful panel.
Thank you. And I would like to thank our partners of this event. That will be the Embassy of Israel in Slovakia, Ministry of Finance of the Slovak Republic, National Bank of Slovakia, 365 Bank, Binance, Visa, Fumbi Networks, and our supporters, Oracle and Embassy of the Slovak Republic in Washington. And the expert guarantee is FINAS and the Fintech and InsurTech Association of Slovakia. So that is the introduction. Let the show begin, right? So let's start. How to build a successful fintech ecosystem. Javier, would you like to comment on how can we build a successful fintech ecosystem? Why not in Slovakia or in Central and Eastern Europe?
So I don't know how to do it in Bratislava. I don't know how to do it in Central Europe, but I can share what we did in Belgium. First, we create Belgium as a bottom-up association. So it's an association created by the fintechs. It was 6 years ago, and then the event, and we became the unique point to meet fintechs and also the single point of contact with policymakers and regulators. And I think when we talk with politics, they have a role to play to attract companies and to develop an ecosystem. And I think this role is more in the environment. So it's to have an environment that is positive, to create new ways, to use new technologies, and then it's also the way, for example, the European regulation is implemented in the country. So we push always the Belgian regulators in our case to avoid gold plating and to avoid to do stronger interpretation in the regulation than our neighbors, just to avoid a negative competitive effect. And then if you have a good environment, for to set up and create new companies together with policymakers and regulators that are open-minded to new technologies and new players, then you have the first steps and the first bricks that are necessary to build this ecosystem. But the final movement, the final energy must come from the companies themselves. It's impossible for the public to create themselves a company. It's the entrepreneurs who have to do that, and a good way is to attract them and to motivate them.
Much. And I would like to get a comment from Peter Penzesh, Head of Payment Service and Innovation section, because that goes hand in hand with what Javier was just talking about, I think. How do you see this from the regulator's point of view and are more working with innovation at the bank?
Exactly. Thank you very much. I was pleased to hear from Javier that he stressed the role of the private market sector in creating the fintech environment, because I think it's vital that the fintech ecosystem is or comprises good interaction between private players and public authorities. It's the private players that should create the pool, and it should be the public authorities that should respond, that should push in the direction of cultivating the fintech environment. And there are many ways the public authorities can respond to the pull from the market. For me, one of the most important things is that the public authorities listen to what the private players are saying, and also they interact with private players through many different ways. And one of them is, for example, to involve them in decision making, in creating new rules, and then also to inform them about the new rules that are coming, so that the regulatory compliance costs can be foreseen in advance. And then there are two other tools that are quite popular over the past few years among public authorities and especially supervisors, and it's the sandboxes and innovation hubs. These are the interfaces between supervisors and private market players that enable public authorities to gather first-hand information from the market, interact with those with most innovative ideas on a either short-term basis in hubs or long-term basis in the sandboxes, and also give them guidance how to adjust their business in line with expectations of the supervisors. So it says that it takes two to tango, and I think it takes two to create and maintain viable fintech ecosystem.
Thank you. And how do you see the future for cross-border payments, which is still today, 2021, slow and somewhat costly, since that seems to be your area of expertise?
Yeah, I think the immediate next step is the instant payments that are launched in some countries already and that are launching in Slovakia next year. So that we expect will be a big change.
Thank you. Anybody would like to comment? Martin Peter, Martin Krendel, or Shmuel, or Javier?
I would like to comment on the ecosystem that was part of your initial questions. As you have mentioned, our group is called the Fintech Community of Israel, not association and not lobby, but a community, because we actually believe in the strength of an ecosystem. An ecosystem means that all the interested parties, everyone who has interest in fintech, is part of this community. And very much like Javier mentioned, we are not only a group of fintech companies. Of course, they make a great deal of our membership, but we also have the financial institutions, the regulators, the academia, consultants, investors. So everyone who has some interest in fintech is part of the group. And I think this is a very major element in building an ecosystem which is supportive to innovation and to the young companies, because they have free and open lines of communication with everyone they need, either be investors or the regulators or others. And maybe down this discussion, we can also discuss the regulatory environment in Israel, which is a story by itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope we can come back to the regulatory environment a little bit later, because it's interesting to learn from what Israel is doing right in that area. Anybody would like to comment here? Martin Peter.
Yeah, from the Ministry of Finance. One question to Shmuel. The thing that you don't have lobbying or lobby in your name, does it mean that you do not lobby, or no? With the government?
No.
Of course, I think it's very good when, as you said, that you have a community, also what Xavier said, that you have a community of fintechs, individuals, companies that are lobbying, that are pushing, doing some pressure on the government, on the supervisory, regulatory authorities. I would just come back very shortly how it is, or how it was in Slovakia, how it is. I think sometimes when there is no pressure from the private companies, sometimes also the state organizations needs to step in and to somehow boost the dialogue in this regard. I think this was it with the Center for Financial Innovation at the Ministry of Finance. We set 2018, and we were active together with National Bank of Slovakia in initiating the discussion on fintech, and I think it worked quite well. And now we are in a situation where also the private companies, private associations, they put quite a tremendous pressure on us in some ways, non-face-to-face identification or blockchain-based companies and their problems to open bank accounts. So these are the topics that are regulatory now discussed quite intensely here in Slovakia. And I think it's very important to discuss. We are open to discussion. It doesn't mean we always listen, but we discuss, yes. And I think it's very important also for us from the regulatory point of view as a ministry to have the mirror, because I was once part of during the Slovak presidency, the preparation of the 5th AML directive. And we had very intense discussions with our colleagues from European Commission, and you saw on their approach that they were really willing to do the right thing, but based on their knowledge from the office. So in some ways there was the interaction with the market participants was missing. And I think good fintech or startup or innovation landscape and ecosystem needs open dialogue, and also private participants who are willing to discuss with state authorities, and for us then to do something with what we've learned from the discussions.
Thank you. Do you see any role of the ministry to also promote fintech in Slovakia, or you're just acting like you're receiving information from the industry, or the ministry acting proactively as well?
We were proactive since the beginning. We try to be proactive. Sometimes it's possible from the highest levels, but I think and I believe more in creating a team and interaction between right-minded people who are willing to do something with innovation and fintech. And I think we should be active because we are masters of taxation, for example. We can have a say on education. We can also we have measures how to boost funding in some way. So yeah, ministry should be active, and I hope we will be even more active as we are now.
Very interesting. I would like to give the word to Martin Krendel, who will comment on this, since he is one from the industry instead.
Yeah, I think that the steps that the ministry and the national bank are taking are really seen and appreciated in the private sector, and I also think that this is a two-way relationship in which both sides can learn from each other, because from the regulatory point of view, I see a divide between where the regulation is at its current state and the state of cutting-edge technology. And I think that activities such as my two colleagues here described are instrumental in closing the gap and getting the regulators to get hands-on experience with new technologies, to understand them as well as the companies and the landscape in the private sector, and then to pass regulation which will promote growth and other opportunities for both the state to profit and also for the private sector.
And the current trends in policy implication, emerging trends, what do we see, what is happening when it comes to regulation in this area? I think that could be for one of you two. I don't know who's most suitable for this follow-up.
Maybe I can start. So,
thank you.
Yeah, in case of Slovakia, we are part of European Union. The most important policy decisions in the area of financial services are being done at the level of European Commission. And we see that the European Commission understands that we are in 21st century and the world is changing every day. Possibly the most revolutionary file that is now before the legislators at the European level is the regulation on crypto assets. This sector is new, but it's not more than 12 years old. It has not been regulated so far, and now it seems that there is already a need or also a case for regulating this sector. And I think it will bring a lot of benefits to crypto asset entrepreneurs, because they are now in a gray zone. Having more clarity, having clear rules on what is expected from them will certainly help them somehow to also be seen as more legitimate part of financial services. And the other strong push we see at the EU level is importance that is now being given to IT security. There is a large file before legislators that should set higher standards for IT security across all regulated institutions, including crypto asset providers. And maybe third area is AML. There we see recurring activities at the EU level aiming at bringing more precise rules in order to diminish the risks connected with money laundering. So in terms of the initiatives, these are possibly the largest, and then there are others which are maybe even more linked to this discussion. There is this initiative to link existing regulatory sandboxes among national supervisors. So I think that would also bring concrete benefits to the market, because that will enable to test innovative solutions, not only in one country, but across more countries in the European Union on the whole single market.
Just, if I may add, one important initiative, or it's a group of initiatives on the European level, is the new AML rules that are on the table. It will, all of you who are from the private sector, it will touch you all, because we will have a more centralized anti-money laundering system in the EU. There is a regulation on the new authority, the European Anti-Money Laundering Authority, that will supervise and coordinate the AML throughout the whole Europe. And so I think this is also very important, because compliance from you who are from the private sector, you know that compliance costs and barriers of entry that are created by the costs of compliance are relatively high. So it will add up, but on the other hand may in some way harmonize the approaches towards anti-money laundering, and more specifically KYC, know your customer, and due diligence processes. So I think that's negative also, but also positive information. And on the national level, we now do, in cooperation with the National Bank and also with the police forces, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the analysis of risk embedded with the new technologies. It's part of the MoneyWow evaluation of Slovakia, and also the overall risk evaluation of Slovakia, where we want to identify potential risks connected with the new technologies, and also come with some solutions or processes that will ease or mitigate these risks. So in order to maybe diminish some barriers of entry, or to make some processes clearer also for market participants, so they will know what processes are required by the FIU in the AML KYC processes in their businesses. Yeah.
Thank you. I have one question from the audience for you as well. What exact steps will the Ministry of Finance execute to support Slovak fintechs? It's a very specific question.
I'm not here to answer a specific question. No, I'm just joking. I touched upon this. There is a quite intense discussion about some aspects of taxation of startups. So not just fintechs, but startups as such. There are certain measures that can help. For example, options. I don't know, the shares or options for shares of startups. So it's a measure, or it's a way how you can attract experts, skilled people from abroad. And the taxation in Slovakia now is that you have to pay the tax in advance. So this is quite heavily discussed issue. Now one specific. I think the cooperation with the National Bank, even if National Bank will fully operate the regulatory sandbox, was quite intense also on our side. So there are certain issues and certain things we are active in, and they are rather specific. And of course, we want to come. We work on this quite for a long time to come up with really strategy or action plan that will comprise or include specific actions that can help fintech. We work on it. We will also share it with the CFI members in a couple of weeks, and we will try to come up with something that is reasonable and not just strategy for strategy, because you know how it works, but really something that we will have a support from the private and also from the public sector that we can really follow in the next couple of years, how to increase or improve the fintech, but also in more general startup environment in Slovakia.
Thank you. So in summary, it's a mix of policy, regulation that is discussed and negotiated with the fintech industry and taxation.
No, it's more complex, I would say. It has also questions related to taxation, but it has regulatory things concerning investments, how to easily use shares and share company like constructs, also education. So it's a mix of policy and non-policy measures that can be used to boost the fintech and startup environment here.
Very good. Thank you for answering the very specific question. Now I have another question from the audience, and I think Shmuel would be useful for this question. That is, how can Slovak ecosystems cooperate, let's say, with Israeli ecosystems, and what can we learn from Israel and how can we cooperate? What do you think, Shmuel?
Okay, first of all, I believe that I'm only one of this panel who do not represent an EU country. So we have many advantages, but we are not part of the union. And it has some disadvantages because, for instance, in matters of regulation, we have to do our own job. When I say we, is of course our regulators, our parliament, and sometimes in the way of adopting what has been agreed and common even in Europe, takes more time to adopt over here. So Slovakia can definitely become an entry point for Israeli companies who want to do business in Europe under European regulations. And because not very much I know about your market, but I do know that there are many, many skillful people. The costs are not as high as would be maybe in Germany or in France. So there is an opportunity here. Down the road, I believe there will be more harmonization of regulation. It was mentioned already that in the Sandbox area, GFIN and other organizations are trying to create a mechanism by which one country's sandbox will be recognized by others. The bad news is that we don't have a sandbox yet. And this is not because the regulators or the industry doesn't want it, but only because we had a political crisis for almost 3 years where our parliament was actually paralyzed and nothing could be passed. But this is on the way to be fixed. I hope that by the end of this year, we'll have a regulatory sandbox. And then it again creates an opportunity to work together with other European companies and regulatory frameworks. So companies that were admitted to the Israeli sandbox will have a more easy way into the European one and vice versa.
Thank you. We already have quite many Israeli startups in the European Union, mainly in Malta, Cyprus, and some in Bulgaria as well. So hopefully Slovakia can be on the list in the future as well. It could be a foothold for the Israeli industry. Why not?
Yeah, what they do in other countries is mostly development work. So their R&D is done in other countries, which is of course an opportunity for Slovakia. But I think the Slovakian market for itself, maybe in European terms, it is considered to be not a big one. But for a small country like Israel, it can double the market scope of a company. So you can't really downgrade it.
Thank you. I have a new question from the audience here. What steps are planned to remove barriers in digitalization of retail banking industry? Under legislative, digital signature is not allowed for mortgages, for example. That must be for either from the central bank or from the Ministry of Finance again. You are very wanted today.
Just could you repeat about the
What
mortgage?
steps are planned to remove barriers in digitalization of the retail banking industry? Under Slovak legislation, digital signatures are still not allowed, for example, for mortgages.
Okay. About the digital signature, like there are, yeah, okay, there are possible ways how to do it now, but they are not as simple as some private initiatives on the market. I consider this as one of the crucial things that we, in fact, do not have an easy way how to digitally sign documents in Slovakia. And I know in Czech Republic, I think there was an initiative together with banks. They use, I think, the cards for digital signature. In Slovakia, we do not have such an initiative. There is Slovensko SK. I don't know if I can even mention this, but yeah. But I know about the project that's in the shelf. How Šufliku, considering the digital or even e-signature, and I think this is because when you go and when you see the other jurisdictions, for example, last time I was doing something with Singapore, and the cornerstone of the innovation in their governmental services was e-signature. So I think this is something we have to focus on, and we have to do something with, because there is no government-backed easy way how to sign, and it can help. Definitely, it can help. Yes.
Do you think it has to be government-backed, or can it be created by the commercial banks and approved by the government as well?
I think where are we in the discussion now? I think it's open. So there is nothing specific on the table. So all initiatives are or all ways how to solve this are open at the time.
For example, in the Nordic countries, is the commercial banking system providing these IDs?
Also in Denmark.
The Nordic countries, Denmark, yeah. Norway, Finland, even Estonia. Anyway, let's see if anybody else want to comment on this before we continue. Anybody else want to say something? Yes, you should have something to say, Martin Krendl. Yeah, you should have a comment on this.
Yeah. It's really appreciated to hear the regulators and the Ministry of Finance to be open to private initiatives, because I really think that this could bring some solution in the long run, and that the inclusion of private sector may be a way out under the supervision of ministry and of the regulators, and that the technology that is out there can be altered or can be modified to serve this need and to help you translate your good intentions into life more easily, more readily, and to make you more reactive to the needs and the environment, I think.
I'll just ask one thing, because in the past I was told that I speak a lot about a lot of things, and then the realization is something we need to see. So in this regard, what we discussed at the beginning, that there is a need for pressure from private sector. I think it's very important that also, if there are issues like e-signature or other barriers, that the private sector is really active in this regard and really put pressure, initiates dialogue, or comes with its own solutions of some issues, because sometimes only this is the way how the state machinery can be, like, initiated to move forward.
Okay, well, thank you. That is great to hear, and it is also a call upon you, private sector, to get together and put some pressure on them.
Yes, Javier, please.
Yes, I think something important for the development of fintechs is to have a huge adoption by the individuals, by the consumers, and then comes the risk of cybersecurity, etc. So I think one good point to start with is to have a frictionless identification scheme, probably through a combination of ID and application, but something that is frictionless, because an ID with a chip that you have to use with a reader, etc., it's not frictionless. And when you start to have a frictionless identification system, then people start to use much more everything about digital finance, and in a wide scale. It's not only for payments, but for every usage. And then the policymakers have a role to play on that, because they can be the motivator for the public sector, for the private sector, to initiate something new. In Belgium, we have a company called EID. It's a company who developed an application on mobile phone. When you create your own identification with your EID, and then with this application, you can connect to a lot of different websites, and amongst them the government ones. So if you need an official document, if you need to download something, if you need to see your pension, whatever, you use this application, and then this application is also used in a variety of private companies like banks, but the post, etc., etc. And such adoption by the individuals. And through this adoption, then you can increase the usage, and then you can make very successful new companies based on those technologies, and to also decrease the cost of usage of those services, because it's frictionless, and then you have a mass of individuals, consumers, using those services. So I think this is a good way for the policymakers, for the government, to motivate the private sector to move in that direction. So I think with this, and the other point, and you talk about that already, but I think the for the supervisors and the regulators to play an active role on promoting new business, and I heard about Sandbox, but it's not only about building Sandbox, it's also a general view and general analysis of the new projects. Then first, you will attract new companies. Second, you will build a huge experience at the regulators, for the regulators, because the first one are the most difficult. And then when you see 10, 20, 50 companies, you start to process them quickly, faster, and then you can also attract much more companies. So it's a learning curve that is very important.
Thank you, Javier.
Javier, I just want to add something about Slovakia. We are not just creating the regulatory sandbox, but the National Bank is operating since 2019 innovation hub. So what you said, the general discussion or general advice on the business model and business plan of fintechs. It's already here. It works. There were more than 60 companies discussing with the National Bank in the past 3 years. So the sandbox, it's like evolution of the ecosystem here in Slovakia. So Innovation Hub was the first step, and then the sandbox is something like an upgrade. It's a second stage. So the companies will not only get the general advice from the regulator how to make things easier, how to make things better, but they will have the opportunity also to test their projects. I just want to underline what you said. It's very important to have the general open-minded discussion with the regulator, and this is what we currently have for 3 years, and it works quite well. And now the upgrade, the second step, is the regulatory sandbox.
Of course.
One additional point on the importance of frictionless online onboarding of clients. Recently, we did a survey of our financial industry and asked about what they perceive as most important trend in innovations on the market, and we received almost unanimous response that it's the online onboarding of clients. So possibility for financial institutions to onboard clients without need to come to their office in order to make a contract with the financial institution. And this practice is already on the market. Considerable number of financial institutions are doing online onboarding of clients. What we see is the divergence between solutions they use. And we are promoting actively certain standard of online onboarding, and then we would like to see the market moving quite quickly to that standard. But I can confirm that frictionless online onboarding is very important trend and something that opens digitalization to mass retail market.
Interesting, with the standard way for the onboarding. Is there something concrete you can say about how this standard way would look like?
It's the AML legislation that sets the basic principles of how this should be done. And there are various, often the onboarding solution is outsourced. So there are various providers who have their products, and they have various quality. The standard we like best is the onboarding that involves recording of the face of the person, and also something that is called the test of liveliness. So the technology should enable to test whether the person that is looking to the camera is actually alive. This is the standard we are preferring.
And the standard for actually the ID of the person. Face is a face, it's not an ID. The way we're doing it now, scanning passports and ID cards and invoice for electricity or something like that seems pretty primitive to me.
But it's a combination of both things, because a person needs to scan or show its ID card. This is the way the financial institution can read who is the person and the details, and then the person needs to enable the company to verify its identity, and the camera recording is the way how to verify the identity of the person. There is a photograph on the ID and then it's compared to the live image of the person. So this is how the identity is verified.
Thank you. I think it clarifies it. Do you have any comments? No. Okay. Then we will continue. And I would like to look into the question you have from the audience here. What needs to be improved in Slovakia in order to ease business conditions for fintech firms? Are there lessons learned from operating the innovative hub? I don't know who would like to start on this question. Okay.
Maybe I can
Peter.
Start, because basically the question ended with the Innovation Hub, and Innovation Hub is something that we operate. So we started with the Innovation Hub 2.5 years ago, and we were not among the first adopters of the Innovation Hub in European Union. We were, I think, the 23rd country in the European Union. But since then, I think the Innovation Hub proved to be very useful to us. It enabled us to have direct interaction with over 70 businesses so far, startups and incumbents as well. So there were both types of businesses that we are communicating through Innovation Hub. And I think it helped us to better understand what is the need of the market. We see that there is a lot of demand for clarity in the area of crypto assets and in the area of payment services. So these are the most prominent members or those who come to us through the Innovation Hub and ask for advice. We give them advice, but we also want to move a bit further, not to only deal with individual cases, but also make some generalizations on the basis of interactions we have from the Innovation Hub. And this is going to the maybe core of the question. We are supervisor. What we can do is to be clearer about how we understand and interpret the rules and what we expect from the market. So one of the things we did in response to what we learned from the Innovation Hub is that we created or we put on our website much clearer guidance on how to put together the application for the license of payment institution. In response to the inquiries about conditions for operating crypto business in Slovakia, we put Q&A on our website where anyone can find the most frequent questions we received. And of course, our answers. And we also are monitoring the environment through other channels because, well, after we saw that there is so much questions from the crypto businesses, well, we decided to monitor that part of sector more closely. We are not responsible for supervising them, but still we want to know what's going on there. And we did a survey of the crypto businesses in Slovakia and learned quite interesting information that we published on our website, made it available to anyone to read, to have better understanding of the sector as well. So then very important lesson we learned is that there is always room for improving the rules, and it's the Ministry of Finance that is empowered to create and change rules for doing business. Of course, it's also the European Commission who is important, but there is still some room in the different areas. And we escalate whenever we learn that there is opportunity to adjust something in the legislation. We come to our colleagues, to the Ministry of Finance, and we have excellent cooperation. So that's, I think, also something very, very important for advancing our ecosystem. It's that we have direct interaction with the market, and then we pass the information that is relevant to regulator, that we pass it to the regulator, to the ministry, and they listen very much. So I think this is our experience with the Innovation Hub.
Martin Krendl.
Yes, I think, or I sense that the need for clarity and ease of use is of vital importance to build a functioning ecosystem with inclusion of regulators and the private sector. And I think that that steps in this direction would create a good substrate to be instrumental to promote innovation and application of innovation in Slovak Republic. This is basically user experience. If the user experience is good, if the user experience, so to speak, of the state is good, then everybody is clear on what has to be done. The rules are clear. There is very, very little interpretation that can go wrong, and I think that this will also ease the role of the state and also promote users, so to speak, this private sector innovators to come here and to have clear idea on what they are getting into, what are the rules, what are the objectives you are pursuing as state authorities or regulators, and this is the way that it could be done. Also, we are not at the cutting edge of innovation in Slovakia. So we, in my opinion, we have to look elsewhere, learn from their mistakes, and also from the things that were done right, and we can copy these things that are working elsewhere and put them in and translate them into real life in Slovakia. And then hopefully we can close this gap to this cutting edge of innovation, and that we can translate this to a positive environment for innovation, for fintech, for technology, and become part of the very few that are on the top in innovation and are attracting this kind of businesses into Slovakia. I think that also the state would greatly benefit from having such firms here, because they are translating to the market very quickly, and they are very quickly either rejected or accepted by the market, and we can see how they're doing rather quickly.
Thank you. Let's look at the collaboration between startups and the incumbent financial institutions. I mean, I believe the bank's going to be here for a long time, so it's more about the interaction between startups in the area and commercial banks today and other financial institutions. How can that be used to accelerate the innovation? And I can think we can give that question to Shmuel. As an economist and president of the Fintech Community, you might have some experience of the cooperation works in Israel.
Okay, I must admit it's a very tricky question, because the banks here actually are on both sides of the equation, if you may put it this way. On one hand, of course, they want to innovate, they want to advance, they want to be seen by the customers and be for real more innovative and cut costs and be more effective. On the other hand, some of the new technologies may threat their historical and well-serving business models that have worked for them for so long. So on one hand, they don't want to miss the boat. On the other hand, they want to last with their current business model or something similar as long as they can. I was present just a week ago in the discussion between the chairman of one of the more established financial institution in Israel and a chairman of one of the unicorns that has developed out of Israel. Really excellent company, traded in billions of dollars. And the topic of the discussion was, can banks, insurance companies, the legacy one, really change and become adopted to the new era? And it was very fascinating to hear that on one hand, of course, the existing bank's chairman said that we are open to innovation and we adopt new startups and we have innovation hubs, etc., etc. While the unicorn said, in very non-polite words, you are doomed. You can do nothing to save yourselves. Your business models, your infrastructure, your overloaded workforce is something that can be changed. It may take 5 years, it can be 10 years, but there will be no more regular banks. There will be only the new players on the scene. So of course we can spend hours on this kind of debate, but in Israel we do see that on one hand the banks are trying to do their best to adopt new regulation, new innovation, and open the doors to new fintechs. But on the other hand, they feel threatened. And I'm not sure that they know exactly for the long run what is their goal. Um, but I can't say, unfortunately, that they are wide open to any kind of innovation. And the test in Israel will come very shortly on January 1st. The first digital bank will come into operation. And this will be a very interesting way to watch what will happen with one digital bank and another one underway against the traditional banks.
Thank you. And a digital bank, is it a freestanding bank or a digital bank started by an already existing commercial bank or a new bank piggybacking on an existing bank's balance sheet? Because in my world, the most important asset in the banking industry is a big balance sheet. And I can see banking as service, banking as commodity in the worst case. But what I see is what the banks can do, even if they're not that innovative, is basically to lease out their balance sheet to other operators that are operating as niche banks on top of the balance sheet, basically.
Yeah, at least in the case of Israel, we are talking about a new independent digital bank that has nothing to do with the old banks.
Anybody else would like to comment on my thought? The banks providing balance sheet basically to niche banks that do niche banking for certain industries or certain groups of people. Can that be the future?
Maybe not exactly what you asked, but about the future of incumbent banks, I think Shmuel already said that the discussion was not very polite. I think also unpolitely said, until the generation that is accustomed to traditional banking model lives. That's the timeline for the banks to extinct in their form as it is now. And I think that's true because the generation that will be completely accustomed to digital environment, non-face-to-face communication, no stone branches and things like that, will not need the model for of banks that exist now. It's only up to the banks whether they will be able to somehow change their models and to adapt. And I think they have like 50 years or 40 years from now to do it. So it's quite a lot of time. Of course, there will be competition from digital banks, as Shmuel mentioned in Israel. We have such all around the world. But I think it won't be a revolution that will say in 10 years there will be all the banks will be doomed. I do not believe in this. I'm more in pro-evolution concept in this regard.
I completely agree with you on this. I just think that the banks will cooperate more with fintechs to provide niche solution for niche customers long before the end of the next decade. Yeah. Please, Martin.
Yeah, the digital generation is coming of age, and they are demanding these services. So the only way forward for the banks is to either adapt or stay with their old model and use the technology that is out there in the world and implement it in a way which the regulator allows. And also the second part of the environment is the regulator who has to see the need and the push for these technologies and to also push for their implementation, for their safe implementation within the limits of reason.
The first Visegrad 4 regulated sandbox in the region will be in Slovakia. Does this accelerate innovation, focus on the financial sector? Does the introduction of the Sandbox increase Slovakia's attractiveness for foreign startups and investors? That question we start with. Okay, please, Peter, you can start, and then we will ask our foreign guests as well.
Thank you very much. So it's us that are creating the regulatory sandbox, and it was the Ministry of Finance that was a strong proponent of that idea, and we listened to their idea. We see that as a trend among regulators or supervisors in other countries, and this time we're not going to be 23rd country in the European Union that is implementing Sandbox. We are going to be 9th country, so we are in the top 10 as far as Sandbox is concerned. Sandbox is starting at the beginning of next year. We'll see how much benefits it will bring. The expectations are high. We heard a lot from the industry about how they perceive the Sandbox as something that will be important in moving forward the whole ecosystem. It's always, as I said, about two sides. Much will depend on the quality of those who will want to become part of Sandbox. We do not have resources to deal with everybody who will be interested. We want to pick those that are most promising and work with them. I think it will take some time until we'll be able to draw a conclusion on how much successful this project is. If all goes as good as with the Innovation Hub, it will certainly bring a new quality to ecosystem in Slovakia.
Thank you. I think we go to Javier. Do you think this will increase Slovakia's competitiveness in the scene of fintech, this sandbox approach suggested by the Ministry of Finance and worked out through the central bank?
I would say that it's a very nice movement to create a sandbox because it creates opportunities for newcomers or even traditional commerce to test new business models, new ideas. So it's definitely a very good decision. And it's good to not wait the European Commission because I think they have a project for a European sandbox. But I think it's lighter and it's easier when it's in your own country. And if you have a direct relationship with the regulators, and I suspect that if it's like in Belgium, the regulators are accessible because the country is also not that, and I think it's also an added value. So I think it's good to transform some points that could be seen as weak to a strengthness, and the fact that the country is maybe not that big can be a plus for the starters and for the scale ups also to get access to regulators, to have regulators with a good open mind, as it has been said previously, and also to have a sandbox. Then I think you have to promote this tool to attract more and more companies from abroad, like our friends from Israel, if they want to set up a company in the European Union, maybe Bratislava it could be a good option for them. So I think yes, it's a good decision. Then it's also the way it will be implemented or the way it will be used, and the workload for both parties, the regulator, because regulators, they have to manage the sandbox, and I know it's heavy, and if it's heavy, it's expensive, and also for the starters, if they have a light process to start working with the sandbox. So this is the details of the implementation that are very important to make it a success. But I'm pretty sure you will handle that.
Thank you, Javier. Shmuel, please, I want your insights on the topic as well.
I think a sandbox is an important element. I would put it under nice to have, but if other panelists were talking before how to make Slovakia more competitive, more innovative, encouraging innovation, and we can't complain in Israel. We have a lot of it. I think it's an important element, but not the most important element. I think the most important element in any innovation, fintech included, is the willing of the entrepreneur to take a risk, because there is no innovation without risk. We know that only a small percentage of all the startups actually make it and succeed. So the question is how the system, including government, including regulation, help people to make it that allow them to take more risk. Because if they take more risk, more will try, more will succeed, and this will advance the industry. In Israel, we have a very interesting model that is now studied by other countries called the Innovation Authority. And the Innovation Authority, after looking into new ideas and new startups, actually decides if support it or not. If they do support it, it is actually a very, very interesting proposition for the startup. Because if they don't make it and they fail, they owe nothing to the government. The government takes a loss. If they succeed, what the government takes from them is a very, very minimal percentage of some kind of royalty, but really negligible. So with this instrument, the startups, the entrepreneurs are willing to take higher risks. And because more are taking risk, we see more companies. Just to mention one figure, in the fintech industry in Israel, which has only about 9 million people, we have now close to 700 startups only in fintechs, which is an amazing number, and it's mainly through these instruments that encourage you to take risk and not to be afraid to be an entrepreneur.
Thank you, Shmuel. I think it's very important words, because that's one of Europe's weakest points, risk capital. It's hard to have access to risk capital. There's not one European market for risk capital, but lots of national markets for risk capital. There's not a one-shop stop for risk capital. At the same time, the average European keep their money in the bank, earning 0% interest, losing billions through inflation every year. And the startup scene and growing companies that are already successful have a hard time raising capital. I understand that most normal people are skeptic for startups, but at least growing companies that do generate profits, again, they're relying on the banking industry and traditional banking for risk capital for growth. That is a big European problem. And my question is, of course, what can we do about that?
There is the initiative of the Capital Markets Union, yeah, but I think in Europe it's more cultural thing. That's my opinion, that the position of banks and bank financing is so strong here that if you ask any company that wants to have capital to do some investments, how it is going to do that, they will tell you that they go to the bank, then they ask for a loan. It's changing now. I said there is the initiative of the European Union on Capital Markets Union, but I think it does not work because when you have evolution of capital markets like in the UK or in the US, you have different setup for businesses to think about finding new capital. Really, the setup in Europe is I go for a bank. What is changing now, I think, is that we have crowd investment companies raising Also in Slovakia, there is one very advanced, but there are also European platforms that provide such investments. It's not really venture capital, but it can really provide capital for a startup or a company that is somehow working a couple of years to grow. And I think it will take time. I think it will take maybe 50 years or so when the not the platforms will be here. Also, the entrepreneurs they will. But to be where US is now in these terms, raising capital through market, it will take at least 50 years because the mindset needs to be changed, and not every entrepreneur is able to and willing to do such change. Yeah.
Yeah, but also I think that we have this group of early adopters, early investors, and maybe so to speak, early majority that are willing to take their money and take some risks. And I think it important for these individuals which have some experience or have a risk appetite to be also from the regulatory point of view be allowed to risk their capital in this type of investments. I know that we must and I honor that we must provide a safe environment for the average citizen. But there are also groups of people which have appetite for risks and which are aware of the risks that they are undertaking in investing in this way. And I think that it is important to have in place a structure which can support them in line with the regulation.
My question here is: do you propose or do you think that state should provide such platform or structure, or it's up to the private companies to do so, and let the state let them do their work and not to intervene too much?
The intervention, I think, would be needed. I see the role of state in this to be provider of the playground, of the regulatory playground, which could be principle based and not based on any hard rules. And such principle-based regulation could also be not as time sensitive, not as in need of frequent changes as the situation progresses. And I think that this in some way could be the way forward also. But there is also a big role of the private sector to cater to such demand and to as you rightly said, to change their mindset and their risk adverse behavior because there is much to gain.
I will comment on it as well, because this crowdfunding is great. It's perfect for startups, but it's so unregulated, so the investor doesn't understand what risk they're taking. Because even if the startup is successful, the startup might just issue more and more shares and dilute the initial shareholders and so on. That's why I think we need a regulatory framework, preferably on the European Union level, so it's the same in each and every country, to make an even play field.
That's the problem with national versus European legislation. What we discussed, the panel before us discussed the MiCA, the markets in crypto assets, and there were questions whether it's good and whether it's won't create more barriers. But this is the case where the European harmonized legislation is needed, because when you have vacuum, where you have no regulation or just a partial regulation, and then you have these national regulations that are competing each other, it doesn't work well. It can work like for 5 to 10 years, to boost the companies in certain countries, but then if you really want to use the potential of the European market, you need to have the same rules. So in this regard, I agree. On the other hand, it's always with the regulation, I say this, be careful what you wish for, because we like to regulate a lot, you know, so, and then sometimes it's not me personally, but you know, the others, but really sometimes then it can end up with something you really didn't expect.
That's what I named too much regulation. That was where I was going with the framework or with the playing field regulation, because too much regulation and too stringent rules are directly contradictory to any innovation, any new ideas, any new tech.
Still, even though the disadvantages of not unified capital markets, there's still 30 fintech unicorns in Europe. It's quite a good number. Unfortunately, UK is counted here as well. It's about 22 in the European Union, which is not bad, mind you. On the other hand, the United States got 81 unicorns in the fintech industry. So obviously Europe with a much larger population is behind here when it comes to unicorns, and that is what I connect back to the lack of risk capital and the difficulty of starting a business. Given that this is far from hopeless, we have a fintech bonanza 2021. Fintech industries have raised over 10.4 billion in the first half year 2021, which is more than in 2019, which was the best year so far for the industry. Due to COVID, 2020 was lower. So we raised more in the first half year this year than we ever raised in the whole year before. So there is a bonanza for the industry, no doubt. So there is risk capital available. And my question is, if anybody have any idea how we're going to continue to be able to raise risk capital in the future? I think Martin. How will we raise, yes, Martin Kredel, how will we raise risk capital in the future? In Slovakia, in European Union, this Sandbox approach, would that not attract more capital? What do you think?
I think that it will highly depend on the implementation of the sandbox and on the rules, because as I was saying, I will circle back to my previous argument, that if you are to test something safely and under the supervision of the regulator, you should have it easier than in the real world, while providing reasonable safety or reasonable regulation. But you should, if you make it harder for the businesses to test their ideas than to do the business outright, then we will discourage them completely, and any company with some appetite for risk will go directly to market, and we will have, so to speak, the Wild West here. So I think that this is, with respect to the sandbox, this is one important tool that we have at our disposal to make it easier and more user friendly to use this sandbox to test out ideas, to get the regulator to experience the technology and the ideas which are then brought to mass market. And also, I see a great deal of experience to be gained by the regulator, by the state, by being able to see the technologies, the advancements firsthand, and dig into them, and get to really know them and understand the underlying technology, which is instrumental to get an understanding for the industry and where it is going. This, I think, should be some steps that could enable us to raise more capital than this year.
Thank you.
Regarding your question whether there is enough risk capital, I think there is. When I had the possibility to speak to people who are responsible for venture capital and seed capital and funds, they say the problem is not with the money, the problem is with projects. It's what Shmuel said. It's about the risk appetite, not on the side of investors, but on the side of entrepreneurs, because there is simply lack of projects that are advanced in a way that they can be invested in, and this is something what regulatory sandbox can help with, because the companies will it will be easier for them to come to a stage where they will be more interesting for the investors, and it will be also more. They will be maybe more willing to take the risk if they will be in a close cooperation, or they will have the possibility to cooperate with the supervisor.
Thank you. And I would like to speak to Javier, what he thinks about the risk appetite and risk capital in the future of Europe, sitting in the center of the European Union.
Yeah. So I confirm that European Union and Belgium as well is very conservative and very risk adverse. Then we have to define what are the needs of the different companies, and it's related to their maturity. And I think if we want to build unicorns in Europe, first we have to build startups, because it's a question of quantity. More you create startups, higher are the chance to build a unicorn. So I think everything starts with the funding of seed and pre-seed money for startups. And with problem in Belgium, it was a really huge problem how to fund startups. At the beginning, the governments, because we are a federal country, so there are more than one government, they started to invest money directly in start, but I don't think it's the good usage of public money. So instead to do that, they change their mind and they create a huge fiscal incentive to push people to fight against their own risk adversity. And so people started to take risk because there was, and there is still, an advantage to invest in startups. So it's what we call the tax shelter, and this incentive create a huge flow of money to startups. But then comes the next problem. You fund your startup on the pre-seed or seed level, and then comes the Series A. And then the difficulty with a small country like Belgium, and I think it's the same in Slovakia, it's to have companies that have a market size enough to develop themselves and to reach the next step. And this is not solved yet in Belgium. So we have a lot of companies that are funded on a seed level. When it comes to Series A, it's much more complex. And what we call the debt valley is really problematic. And then what we do in Belgium, we go outside the country to find venture capital to fund the next level and the next development. But it's not that good because they prefer to invest in their own country. Despite they invest, but it's not the same valuation, for example, as a similar company in France or in UK. And then also they want to move the economic core of the company to the country where they are. So it means that we see companies moving to UK or moving to France because there is more money on that side. So I think the next step is how to find a way to create national VCs that are able to invest in Series A and Series B in the companies. That's another challenge. That's another challenge.
And I have a similar question from Shmuel. A small country like Israel with 9 million people, how is Israel solving the issue with risk capital?
Yeah, I would say that historically, maybe surprisingly, the early stage has not been a critical question here. First of all, because of the government support that I discussed earlier. And second, there is a big community of angel investors and local venture capital firms that were supporting ventures in their early stages. The main difficulty in Israel was at the growth stage. There was not enough capital for companies to grow beyond round A or round B even, and not every company wants or is able to go public. So there was some kind of a death valley over there. And the end result was that people, entrepreneurs, were exiting too early. They were happy to sell their companies at an early stage, and there was no growth. This has changed dramatically in the last, I would say, 3-4 years, where more and more growth capital came to the Israeli market, both by local growth capital funds and many international players, both venture capital and also private equity. And today, I would say that a company that has the potential to grow and to expand itself much further would rather wait and grow up. And as a result, we have for the first time in Israel, not one and not two, but a number of unicorns in fintech, in cybersecurity, in other industries, because they have the availability of the funds. There are investors looking for such opportunities. So I think the outlook in Israel for risk capital, for venture capital, is quite optimistic.
Thank you. I have one question for Peter here. That is really the European Union Payment Service Directive, PSD2. Is that still a major driver of fintech development, or is that wave almost over? What is your comment on that?
Well, we have around 200 PSD2 businesses in Europe. Since it's a quite new directive, I would say that it's quite a success. And PSD2 opened or created the open banking not only for startups, but it also enabled incumbents to connect and gather information from other banks and provide that information to customers in single application. So I would say that it was a step in a good direction. The market is quite lively. Over past 2 years, we licensed 3 entities that got AISP or PISP license under PSD2. And we still receive quite a lot of questions about those business models. But PSD2 also brought challenges that need to be addressed in the revision of the directive. One of the most important challenges is that there is no single European standard for application protocol interfaces, which creates a lot of costs for those startups that want to engage in that type of business. So I think it was a very good idea. It created a lot of opportunities, but there is quite a lot of room to improve.
Thank you. According to a recent survey, 3/4 of fintechs see their primary business objective as working with traditional financial institutions, which underlines the bank's going to be here in more or less the current shape for a very long time to be. However, the profit sharing between the bank and the technology company may change over this time period to some extent. Yeah. And our time is up, so it's time to round off this. So everybody get a chance to say some final words if they like before we finish. We can start here with Martin.
I just want to thank everybody participating in this panel, and also to our audience that they have stayed with us until the end. I think that some great ideas were shared or some great discussion was had, and I also thank my co-panelists here, and give the word to Martin here.
To the next moment.
Yeah, thank you very much for having the opportunity to discuss here this topic. And what I take from this is that we have a lot learn. There is really a lot that we need to think about and we can improve. But on the other hand, there is a lot we already did in order to provide or to support fintech here in Slovakia. And I will be happy if we will stay somehow in touch because the jurisdictions as Israel and Belgium, they are really similar in size and also in the basic principles how they operate regarding the regulation. So there are a couple of questions I have to our co-panelists, and I'll be happy if we can stay in touch and discuss really further some issues. Thank you.
One or two sentences from my side. I would say that building a viable fintech ecosystem takes time. It's 18 months since the National Bank of Slovakia prioritized fintech. 18 months ago, we were not that much welcoming to innovations. It changed. We are very much in the listening mood. I see a lot of stakeholders in the audience that I know from the many interactions we had over those past 18 months. We need to work together, we need to cooperate, because if we give up, if there is no interaction, then we will not advance. So I would like to encourage those with innovative minds to use the opportunities we create and platforms we have and come to us and talk to us so that we can work together.
And over to our foreign guest. We start with Javier.
It was a very interesting exchange. So again, thank you very much for the invitation. Indeed, there are similarities between Belgium and Slovakia, size of the country, size of the market size, etc. I think what I saw very positive is the involvement of the policymakers of Slovakia, the government and the regulators in the event, and also in the fintech industry in general. And I think it's the key to the development of this sector. So those are very positive. Like a lot of countries, you have a lot of challenges to face. How to attract equity, how to attract companies, how to attract good projects, how to attract human resources, which is a huge problem nowadays in Europe. But then it's what every entrepreneur faces every day. So I think it's very enthusiastic. So yeah, very positive on that. Thank you.
Shmuel, our last speaker for today.
Okay, first of all, really thank you for inviting me and having me on this very important panel. We are eager to develop even further our international cooperation on fintech. We are very happy to have met FINAS, and we'll try to do more with them. And of course, we are available to every Slovak entrepreneur, policymaker who wants to exchange views with us, who wants to collaborate with us. I think it's a part of the game. Fintech and innovation at large are not a local game. It's an international one. And opening new adventures and new contacts are always very, very helpful for us. Thank you.
And I would like to thank all the panel members, the ones abroad. Javier, Shmuel, I would like to thank the panel members are here. Martin and Peter. It's great to have you on the panel.